good morning. It's Monica from Life is Art, and I am just getting everything set up here. My husband got me. There we go. If you're watching, you've just seen my screen go from crazy bright to hopefully normal. If you're joining me live, just say hello or howdy so I know you're here. And if you're watching later on replay, you can say replay. We are doing the 10 a.m. technique at the Let's See New York online crop. Good morning, Joanne. Nice to see you joining me bright and early. And we are looking at the new November-December catalog during this crop. And specifically, what you see on the front cover, that is our featured collection for the month of November, and it is called Silver Bells, and it is a beautiful collection of gorgeous color combination of charcoal, toffee, mink, linen, and white daisy. And so we're going to be using some of that pattern paper today. We're going to be using some of the embellishments where you're going to use some contrasting cardstock instead of the coordinating cardstock. And we're also going to be using the card making stamp set. And we're going to be doing what I'm calling a Criss-Cross card method. And it's a fun way to create a card using very little paper, actually, to create the base of the card. And then, of course, the embellishments can kind of go anywhere from there. Good morning, Michelle. Oh, no, sick in bed. Ugh, that is not the way to get a break, is it? Being sick is no fun. So we're going to start out with a piece of cardstock and a piece of pattern paper. And so I've got a piece of Scarlet cardstock, which is a contrasting cardstock to the colors that are in this collection, the Silver Bells. But it looks very lovely because it goes so nicely with that toffee and charcoal colors. So this piece has been cut to 5 inches by 3 3/4. And then I have a piece of this beautiful pattern paper. Oh, and I'm seeing the lights are still having some trouble here. Let me just adjust my lights a bit. That looks better. So this is the gorgeous pattern paper that has the large icons on it. It has a mink background. It's got these swags of little pearls going across. Lots of foliage and pine cones and bells and bows and some script as well. The back side of this, yes, the pulsing, that's like if I move, it tries to refocus and it does that thing. I know my my other camera used to do that too, and then we sorted it out, but now I'm using a webcam and it decides it needs to do that as well. So the less I move, the less that will happen. On the back side, we have the ornaments all over with a white background. And so I really like both of these patterns, and this card takes advantage of both of these patterns. And so let me just bring in my little photo trimmer, and I'm going to show you this Criss-Cross method. And you know what? Chances are you have seen this before. You just maybe haven't thought of it for a while. So I know that the front pattern here is the right way up because I've got these little pearl swags, and the pearl swags all go the same direction. Some of the script goes different directions, some of the icons go different directions, but those pearl swags go left to right. So that keeps me in line. And what I want to do to create the Criss-Cross pattern is I'm going to trim my piece of paper, that, let me just give you that measurement again, is 4 3/4 by 3 1/2. We're going to trim it from the top the top left to the bottom right, and from the bottom left to the top right, straight through. So let's open up our trimmer, and we're going to line it up so that the 2 points, the top left and the bottom right, are lined up where it's going to cut. Sometimes this takes a little bit of patience. And then we're going to trim, just like that. Now, some people would sort of washi tape this back together. I take my chances that I can line it back up and keep it in place. So it's totally up to you whether you add a little bit of washi tape. You just have to be careful, because if your washi tape is really sticky, you're using both sides of your paper, so you don't want to damage it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in here from point to point going the opposite direction, and I'm going to do my best to line that pattern back up. The parts where there's script and icons going across, those are the best places to kind of eyeball lining it up. And then hold it together, line it up point to point, and then whoop, trim it that way. Now you want to keep it all together for a moment while you decide what's happening. So for me, what I want is I want this side pattern, if I can pick it up, to be on the front at the top. So I'm going to just place it here on my cardstock. Then I'm going to take this bottom piece and place it here. And then these two side pieces, because the pattern on the back side goes either way, I can just flip them over. If your pattern is vertical specific, where if it's not straight up and down, it looks wonky, then you can flip it this way, horizontally, so that it's still the way it should be. Now, if I'm looking at these, I notice that these two look like they're kind of upside down. So if I really want them, I can try to switch them, but then it makes those ones look upside down. So I think I'm happy with having them like so. And there we go. Now, if you are using a paper that has a larger contrast in color than the two I'm using, this one has a different colored background, but this one has the same sort of coloration for the ornaments. The scale of the images are a little bit different because of the small size of these pieces, though. It's not as noticeable. So if you like a greater contrast between patterns, you're going to pick a pattern paper that has a larger difference in contrast. But I don't mind this. I kind of like the way it looks. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my liquid glue and I'm going to start gluing down my pieces. And what we're going to try to achieve is having some of that Scarlet cardstock showing through between all of the pieces and creating those crisscross lines. So liquid glue is nice because you can kind of smoosh it around. There is just going to be the tiniest little, 1/8 of an edge on these of this cardstock showing. And we'll add this one. So you can see that one piece of paper, this is the great thing about double-sided pattern paper and double-sided cardstock, because you could do this same thing with just cardstock. Having them double-sided is really a benefit for designs like this. So there we go. And then this one, you just got to make sure that you don't flip them over and put the wrong pattern facing up when you're doing this kind of thing. And there's our next one, like that. And then our last little triangle. So this is not a hard method of creating a card panel, but it creates a really pretty design. And of course, that leaves lots of time and energy for doing some embellishing. So we're going to do some fun embellishing on this one as well. We're not only going to be using a stamp set to embellish, we're also going to be using a set of the thin cuts. And let me grab my bone folder. I folded my card base with the bump side to the inside so that it creases down really nicely. And then I'm going to add my card panel to the front of my card. It's going to center on there, and I'm using a standard size card, so 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I'll grab my piercing tool so I can pull those backings off. And even though this is going to be horizontal, I'm going to put it vertical so I can line things up. I'm just used to doing it that way. We're going to center this right in the middle of our card. Now, of course, you could add as many layers as you want. You could do double matting. There's lots of space here, but I like that nice white edge because we're going to get, you know, a little busy in the inside. So it's nice to have a little bit of rest on the outside. Hey, Mom, nice to see you're watching. Yeah, you're going to see that in and out. Like if you watch, when I lift my hands up, it's going to bump, 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 bump. Anytime where I'm not like completely flat or just moving, it's going to do that. It's kind of crazy. Right? I'm loving this pattern too, Michelle. It looks so fun. Okay, so now what we need to do is a little bit of stamping. So I'm going to scooch this out of the way. Just set it off to the side there. And I've got my stamp set, the Silver Bells Cardmaking Stamp set. We're going to be stamping this little ornament with a little bit of holly on there. And so let me, oh, I've already got it loaded on my block. I don't even have to get it out. Look at that. So prepared. So we're going to be stamping this, and I'm going to stamp it with intense black ink. And this time that choice is not just because that's the black I use, it's because I'm going to do something a little bit wet on this, and you need to have that intense black ink for the technique. So we're going to go ahead, stamp that down. And what else do we need to do? I'm going to also do some heat embossing. I just realized I didn't get my stamp chamois wet, and now I need to clean my stamp. So I'm just going to use my water bottle to add a little bit of moisture to my stamp chamois. I was asking the ladies on Chat and Craft yesterday if any of them do that. You know, in a pinch, you just use the water from your water bottle to moisten your stamp chamois. And apparently I'm not the only one. It's a thing. All right, so now I'm good and wet because I had a bit of a puddle going on. So I'm just going to make sure that my stamp gets dry before I go on to the next thing. There we go. Okay, so I want to do some heat embossing, and I'm going to be stamping this same image again onto some Scarlet cardstock. And of course that's coordinating with the Scarlet that we have in the background there. So let's get a bunch of stamping done here. And we're going to use our anti-static pouch to just take the static off of that piece of paper. Then we're going to bring in our Versamark ink as well as our silver embossing powder. Now these are retired items, but I'm sure if you're a person who does heat embossing, you've probably got some in your stash somewhere. And I only really want the ornament, so I'm actually stamping off the side of my cardstock so that I don't, you know, just waste the whole piece. I'm sure I could stamp, you know, at least one more on there. Then I'm going to take my silver embossing powder and just sprinkle it over the ornament. I don't even care if I get it on the holly, and actually, where I did get it on the holly, if you want to, you can try to brush away some of that extra embossing powder before you emboss. So let me just lift this up here. So you see how there's embossing powder over here on the edge? I'm going to very carefully, just go around the edge because I want to keep that line around my ornament, and just brush away, just with a dry paintbrush, any excess embossing powder that's sitting on top of where that stamped image got stamped with the Versamark. Now, because I'm going to fussy cut this after I heat emboss it, that's not essential. I could just trim it off with my scissors, but if you were trying to fussy cut it out with the halo around it, then you would want to do that. You would want to try and remove that excess embossing powder. So let's go ahead. We're going to heat emboss this. So I've got my heat tool here. I've lifted my paper up off, and if I show it to you right now, it's kind of dull and dry looking. And once I have the heat on there, you'll see the transformation happen, and it will change to bright and shiny right before our very eyes. It's a little bit in the shadow there. You can see it getting shiny. And there we go. So look at that. I love that heat embossing. Looks so lovely. Okay, so we've done that one. Now I also want to do some heat embossing on a tag. Now you remember how I said I was going to bring in a thin cut. And these are the all-purpose tags, and I believe the last time I checked, which was only a week or two ago, this is still available online. It's not in the catalog, but it's available online. So the all-purpose tags, and we are going to cut out a couple of tags actually. So let me see, I want this one down here that's got a dovetail and some stitching, and then I also want this one with the little scallopy edge. It's nice to have those tools in your stash that you like to pull out over and over again to use for different things, right? So die cuts that are tags and things like that are really useful. Okay, grab the big machine. Now I've got a piece of scrap paper. I keep my scrap paper in sort of color family baggies. And that is a piece of rosemary. And it's a weird shape, but it doesn't matter because I'm die cutting. So I'm going to die cut on the dark side of the rosemary. And I'm just going to stick it in. I don't need to washi tape it down. The other tag that I have here with the scalloped border, I'm going to bring in a piece of silver glitter paper. We've already done silver heat embossing, so we might as well do some silver glitter on there as well. And I can stick both those tags in at the same time, save a little bit of arm power, and just put my top plate on, run that through. There we go. And there is our stitched little tag. I'm going to throw my die cuts back onto the magnetic sheet. If you hear any crazy laughter in the background, that's just my son. He's watching something. And yeah, or chatting with a friend, one or the other. So it's getting a little rowdy. And there we go. We have a nice glittery scalloped edge tag. And then we can move this out of the way. Who else stores their die cut plates in their die cut machine? Does anybody else do that, or is it just me? Hey Deborah, good morning. So we've got a lot of stuff going on right now, but I do want to do more heat embossing because, you know, it's kind of like that movie Over the Hedge, when enough just isn't enough. We're going to do some more on this little tag. So I'm just going to go ahead and use my anti-static pouch on that. Then I also want to bring in one of the sentiments from this stamp set that says, "Wishing you joy." I'm just going to walk that off and grab ourselves a stamp block. Pick it up. And we're going to use our Versamark, as well as, I'm looking around, our white embossing powder, because that's going to look lovely on our Rosemary cardstock. And I'm going to heat emboss it as close to that dovetail as I can. So I want to leave more space by the taggy end. I don't know, I always call that the taggy end. And scrap paper to collect our embossing powder. There we go. Because of course by that taggy end where the, you know, where you would put a string through, that's where we're going to do some embellishing. So we need to leave some space for that. That I smushed a little bit hard when I was stamping my letters, so I can see that my S is going to be a little funky. So I'm going to see if I can Yeah, close enough. I was going to see if I could kind of modify it. Sometimes when you're doing heat embossing, it's good not to push too hard on your stamp, because if you squish down, then some of those fine little letters kind of get smushed together with the extra thickness of the embossing powder. And then you need to fix it. So I made a sort of a little adjustment there. We'll see if it turns out. If it doesn't, we'll have to start again, but I think it'll be okay. Wishing you joy. I think that's a really nice sentiment. And there we go. It doesn't take long, especially when the heat tool is already warmed up. So there we go. We've got wishing you joy. We're not going to do any heat embossing on the glitter, although you can. You just have to be careful. Now I'm going to get some of the dusties off of our little ornament here. There we go. And also off of our wishing you joy. And the way that I do that is very fancy. And I just rub it on my pants. I'm sure if I was even more fancy, I could get a little cloth and have it on hand, but you know. So for this particular part of my embellishment, so we're going to create kind of a little cluster. So if you ever need help creating clusters, here's a little tutorial. So we're going to start out with this one that we stamped on White Daisy with our intense black ink. I'm grabbing my small round water brush, just going to take the lid off that, and I've got my Rosemary ink here. Now the great thing about the stamp pads is that they're magnetic, so you can open up really easily. But also, if you squeeze them, you will transfer ink from the stamp pad onto the lid. See all that lovely juicy ink? I probably didn't need to squeeze that much, but then I always put my actual ink pad way over there, so that it's not going to get involved in anything that's happening next. And I also grab myself a tissue to have on hand. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my water brush to pick up some color. I'm just going to test the color over here. Looks good. From the ink. And we're going to paint these little hollies. And I find the easiest way to paint stuff like this is to kind of work at a really shallow angle, or steep angle, shallow angle, so that your brush kind of makes a wide path. You see that? See how by squishing it sideways, I created a wide path of ink. Oh, the color is fading out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just smoosh down and fill in these holly leaves, and they don't have to be precise, so you just kind of put it at one end and smoosh it down and work your way back up the other side. And then once you've gotten one bit of color on there, you may want to go back and darken the color, at least on part of the leaf. So let's go all the way around, getting all of our little leaves. And this is fun because now we can exactly match our rosemary because we're using the ink that coordinates. So I'm going to grab some more ink, and I'm just going to come along and add ink to one side of the leaf, kind of the bottom side of all the leaves, just to create a little bit of different variation in color on them. Like that. All the way around. And I'm trying not to add too much water because this is not watercolor paper. This is White Daisy cardstock. So it's not meant to take a lot of water. And then all you do to clean your brush is just squeeze and then just keep rubbing until it comes out clean. And then your tip will be nice and clean, ready to go for the next time. Now I've added a little bit of water into my lid here. So I don't want to waste all the ink that I smushed on there, but I don't want to add any water into my stamp pad. So I'm going to clean up this part here that I used with the water, And now I can put the lid or the base back onto my stamp pad. Okay, and then I'm going to switch to the Scarlet ink. Going to give it a little squeeze. Remembering to put my stamp pad far away so that I have to think about it before I put the lid back on. I have to actually reach for it. So it's not just, oh, flip and end up with water in my stamp pad. I don't want that. That'll make stamping later very splotchy. So now I'm going to pick up some of the Scarlet, and there's just a few little berries here amongst the holly. And we're just going to add some Scarlet ink to those. That's all. Hardly anything. And then we'll clean our brush off. Just give it a little squeeze and a rub. We'll clean up our minute amount of water we used. And then we can put that back on. And great. Okay, so now, what do I want to do now? I've got a whole bunch of pieces of things here. So I could do some die cutting on this. That's what I could do. So in here, you can purchase this stamp set with die cuts. So I have the die cut for this little holly and ornament. So why don't we do it? Usually I would just, you know, grab my scissors and cut it that way. But it's here, so let's give it a go. That's a really wide piece of washi tape. So I'm going to cut it in half. Going to line up my die. I like to stamp and do everything first and then do the die cutting. Some people do the opposite, but I find it much easier for me to sit here and wiggle a die around, lining it up, than to try and wiggle a stamp around when you've got it all inked up, ready to go. So let's give this a trim. But we are going to do some fussy cutting. For those of you who are worried, there will be fussy cutting because we have to cut out the other ornament. And the die won't cut that. So Deborah, you store your plates in your die cut machine too? Yeah. I find that they, it keeps them from warping if you do that. It keeps them from going out of shape because they're always in the right shape. Now remember I said when you get little bits like this, I just take my top plate and scrape it across. There we go. Right into the trash. And that keeps them clean. So my plates, I've been using my plates for probably a year and a half since I replaced them. And they're pretty well still straight. And that's because I keep them in here. If they do start to bend one way or another, I flip them and keep them so it's always pushing them back down into shape. So there we go. Let's put our die back onto our magnetic sheet so we don't lose it. And then let's fussy cut our little ornament. We're going to rough cut off that. And this time, normally when I fussy cut, you know I say leave a halo because that is your insurance. Because I'm layering this up, and it's kind of like a paper piecing project, I am actually cutting right on the line. So this is when it gets a little bit tedious, but the heat embossing does help because the paper feels different when you're just cutting paper as opposed to when you're cutting where the embossing powder has been activated. And so that kind of makes an ledge. It's like when you do a wet technique over embossing. It kind of creates a little ledge so things don't always go past it. Resists. So it kind of resists your scissors, so you get that sensation that, oh, that's not where I want to cut, right? So there we go. We've cut that out. Now let's bring in our scalloped tag here, as well as our Wishing You Joy. Now the Wishing You Joy is going to have to be glued down with some liquid glue because you can't stick something onto glitter paper without using liquid glue. So I want it to kind of go at an angle. I want my two openings here to kind of overlap So I'm just going to go ahead and add a good amount of liquid glue right to my glitter. Line that up like that. And about there. And squish it down. You want that glue to kind of get in the nooks and crannies and to hold everything together. There, I got some little squishing out there because I was generous. Generous with the glue. Alrighty. And then we are going to attach this part of our embellishment kind of at a fun angle here like that. So we can actually use our tape for this because we're going to be attaching to that Rosemary cardstock. So it's interesting when you look at the things in your stash, your tags, your stamps, that you kind of visualize in your mind, hey, those kinds of things would look good together. And I think I overshot my little tag here. I got lots of liquid glue jumping out at me. And when you do that, you kind of start in your mind putting things together. You say, okay, that would look good with that. That would look good with that. And the more you play with them, the better you get at seeing those possibilities. So let's add some foam tape to the back of this because not only are we piecing it, we're going to layer it up and create some dimension. And this is actually the thin foam tape. It doesn't really matter, but that's what I grabbed. And I'm going to use my tweezers for this so that I can line it up. We're going to line it up right on top of where the other stamped ornament was, like that. So we've created a nice little embellishment cluster. We've got some glitter, we've got some watercolor, we've got some heat embossing in white and silver. We've got some contrasting cardstocks, the Rosemary and the Scarlet. And that's a really nice cluster. Now you could use that on a layout. You could use it on a card. You could add it to a larger tag for a gift, or use it just like that for a gift because you can write on the back of the glitter paper. So I think that's a really fun, versatile way to create an embellishment for any sort of project. Just a couple tags, stamped image, layers, and you're good to go. So now let's add some more foam tape, and this is why I use the thin foam tape, because we're going to get 2 layers of foam tape on here anyway. And we'll just add some here and there. I'm going to trim that in half so we can kind of share it around. And a little bit on there. There we go. And then we can peel off the backing. The great thing about those non-stick scissors is that you can cut foam tape, you can fussy cut, and just kind of keep going along. If you're using foam tape that's not a great quality, you can still get a little bit of goo on your scissors, but because they're non-stick, all you have to do is take your rub and remove eraser and just run it along your blade, and it'll take care of any little gooey bits that might be on there. Okay, so I want to attach this so that my sentiment is somewhat level on my card, which I can't really see from where I'm looking, but there we go. And then we need to do a little bit more embellishing because, like I said, enough just isn't enough. So we're going to bring in the silver Bells dots. And for this one, I decided to use the silver. We're going with silver heat embossing, silver glitter paper. We may as well go all the way in and use the silver dots as well. So let's grab a nice big one here. We'll tuck it right in there and amongst the holly and the edge of the tag. And then we'll take a medium one, stick it there, and a small one. We'll stick it there, just kind of adding to our little embellishment cluster that's happening. And then I went into my stash, and I know you all have a stash, and I found some silver embellishing thread, which is now a retired item, and it's been retired for a while. And you can see that I use it a lot, and I am running out. So sad. I'm going to have to go to the fabric store or something and get some silver thread. And I just want a little bit of it. Now, when you take it off of a paper like this, you'll notice, or I don't know if you can see because it's kind of small, it gets all kinky from being on the card. So all you do is take the back edge of your scissors, not the cutting blade, the back edge, and just run it down the length of the thread a couple times, like you would do for curling ribbon, but just nice and gently, and that takes the kink out of your thread. And then I've got, I don't know, 12 inches here. Just going to snip that off. And then what I usually do is I use 2 fingers. I kind of hold it with my thumb, and then I go around my 2 fingers 1, 2, 3 times, maybe. And you can even do a little 4th little bloop there if we want. And then what I do is I kind of try to hold all the little bits together in one spot here like this. And that's when I'm going to bring in a glue dot. Now I'm using a micro glue dot for this because I don't want to take up a lot of space, which makes it a little bit tedious. So all I'm going to do, I'm going to pass it to my other hand because I'm right-handed, is find the next glue dot on the roll, and I'm going to stick all those little threads into the glue dot if I can. I usually use big glue dots, but there's not a lot of space where I'm going to put this. So I'm just using the little micro ones. And then I take my piercing tool and I just slide it into the side of that glue dot and pick it up. Okay? Don't try to pull the thread back off because it'll just make a mess. Use your piercing tool. And now you also have it stuck to your piercing tool. So you can move it around and put it where you want. So I want to tuck it under here. And I've got foam tape under there, which left a nice little gap. And so I'm just going to push it under and then kind of, it's kind of like, you know, I got blood work done the other day. When they're done with the blood work, they say, put your finger and then, yeah, I won't go into too much detail. So that's what we're doing. We just kind of push it down so that that glue dot gets stuck, and then we pull the piercing tool out. And then you can kind of play with the little floofy silver embellishing thread to kind of rearrange it how you like it. But there we go. We have created a crisscross card using 1 pattern paper, but creating a pattern with 2 just by doing that crisscross cut, adding that contrasting cardstock. It's not a coordinating color for this collection, but it looks really pretty with that toffee. It almost makes the toffee in the pattern paper look a bit reddish, right? And then we've got that contrasting rosemary that's very similar to the mink and the charcoal that's happening. We've got our watercolor that we did with our inks and our water brush. We've layered up. We used our thin cuts to create tags, layered up with some silver heat embossing, and then some little embellishments, some silver dots, and some silver thread. And I think that's really fun. It takes a nice elegant pattern and adds a little bit of glitz and glam to it to create a really fun card. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing that come together. And if you make a card like this using that crisscross method, be sure to take a photo of it and pop it in the comments where I post the photo, because I would love to see what you create. All right, have a wonderful rest of the morning, and we will be back at 11:30 for Chat and Craft. We'll see you then. Toodaloo. Bye.